Hello, everyone. Raelan here. I have another really incredible interview for you today. I really think you're really going to enjoy this one. It's with a very wonderful person named Miguel. He has had a very trying journey with chronic fatigue. He's been incredibly unwell, and he now, for all intents and purposes, is fully recovered. So I'm just really excited to bring his story to you and help share, what's worked for him and the things that he's learned along the way. So hello, Miguel. Thank you so much for doing this today.
Super happy to be here. I've been very excited to do this and just get the message out there. I know there's a lot of people who want to hear more information about this to help them on their journey. So it's great to be here. It's great to be here.
Yeah, I really appreciate it. And I really love how much you're working to get your story out there. I think people like us know very well how important it is to have hope and to see that other people are getting past these things so that we have some fuel to keep going, because it's tough work sometimes getting past this. So why don't you tell everybody where you are in the world?
I'm in Vancouver, Canada right now.
Another Canadian, yay. I'm currently in San Francisco, so people tend to think I'm American, but I am Canadian as well. So we're here obviously to talk about your health journey. So can you take us back a bit and let us know how this all started for you and what that looked like?
So, if we rewind the clock, just growing up, I was just a regular kid. I loved playing outside, loved playing sports. Grew up in Vancouver, BC, one brother, basic family, but I was always into sports, being active. I was one of those kids that just could not sit still. I loved going to school and seeing my friends. I was very social, and outgoing. And, from a young age, I always had that competitive spirit in me. And, that kind of trickled into my high school years and even after high school. So during high school, I got even deeper into sports. I was playing football. I was in wrestling and doing as many activities as I could. So literally my day in high school was I would have to be in school from 7:30 a.m. and I would usually leave around 6:30 p.m. And that was a typical day, 5 days a week for 5 years, and from grade 8 to grade 12. But anyways, throughout that journey, I realized, I want to be a personal trainer. And that was my goal. I wanted to coach people as a personal trainer and help them get healthier. And after graduating high school, I went to UBC Arts, and then I ended up doing personal training. So I actually had to go to personal training school. But at the same time, as all this is happening, I always had some kind of business thing going in my mind. So I always wanted to start a business. So I was selling candy in school at a young age. In high school, I was actually selling lots of protein powders and pre-workout and stimulants and supplements like that. Mainly pre-workout because it was a very athletic school. And so I had all these supplements in my locker, and I would be kind of distributing them to people, running a little business out of my locker. But what happened was I started dipping into my own supply, right? I was drinking caffeine and energy drinks all the time, at least one a day. And it only got worse and worse as I got into, the personal training world. And, I was working multiple jobs, studying for personal training, and finally getting hired to become a personal trainer. I pretty much just burned the candle on both ends. I remember specifically sitting in that office, getting hired and, being hired to one of the biggest gyms in the province here, and telling myself that I'm literally going to do whatever it takes to be the best trainer in this company. And I remember committing at that moment. And just me doing that, it pretty much led me down a path of, having no disregard for my health and, trying to outwork everybody else so I could be the best trainer. But eventually, I got a little bit sick, started feeling some symptoms. When you're working 7 days a week, and not really resting and not really sleeping much, and you're just so focused on that thing and putting health aside, then your body kind of hits a wall. So for me, it started with headaches and insomnia and heart palpitations. But there was one instance where kind of changed the tide of my health. Leading up to this point, I was able to work out and stuff, but, even going up a flight of stairs, I'd feel my heart pounding and I would be sweating very easily. But this one day I was in a library studying sales from a book, and I drank this coffee or this energy drink. And as I'm studying in the library, I start feeling my heart pounding, and I look up, all of a sudden I get that tunnel vision, and I had the worst panic attack. And I think it was even worse than a panic attack. It was crazy because my heart rate was 160. They had to call paramedics in, and head felt like it was going to explode, ringing in my ears, everything. They even had to give me oxygen. And pretty much from that point on, it was a 4-year, like, very, very difficult struggle with chronic fatigue where, I had to say no to hang out with friends. And a lot of times I couldn't get out of bed. And it slowly got worse throughout the years. Like, I would get a little bit better, but then get way worse, then a tiny bit better, and then way worse. So it was just like a slow decline for about 4 years until I absolutely hit a wall and I could not even get out of bed. Like, even lift my head off a pillow. I had to go live with my grandparents, and they had to, like, feed me most of the days. And that went on for about 8 months until I got better.
I am so sorry that you had to go through that. Of course, I've had my own health journey, but everyone is different. I can't even imagine how scary and hard that must have been. And it's so interesting listening to your story that so many of us, not everybody, for sure not, but we start this journey with this intense focus on fitness that seems to be really detached from health. I worked out a lot. I was in the best shape of my life when I became unwell, but I really had no sense of health. Like, I was pushing myself too hard, doing the energy drinks, stressed all the time, not getting enough sleep, all of that. So it sounds like you started out really driven and really focused, and a lot of focus on fitness, but the big picture of your health wasn't fully there either.
The thing with something like having lots of drive and motivation inside, and like being very, very disciplined, it's almost like a double-edged sword. So it can serve you on one end, but it can also be your biggest, downfall. Like, if you go too hard at something in one direction, and you need some yin to the yang. But I was never resting. I was never taking my foot off the gas pedal. So, I experienced that double-edged sword. And on the outside, I was super fit. Like, had muscles, I had like abs, I could go down the beach and feel great about my physical body, but deep inside I was, things were probably the opposite. I was like very, very anxious, especially leading up to that like major crash. And, it's like looks aren't always what they seem, right? On the outside can be totally different from the inside. I think a lot of us, like, while we might be succeeding in life and things are happening externally, inside it's like more and more pressure on us. And, inside we're really breaking down. And people sometimes don't realize it until it's too late, or they get too sick, and then they really have to stop everything else.
And I think, like, did you find it's all the more confusing for the people around you, and maybe even for yourself, when you do look so physically fit and you're having these extreme chronic fatigue issues? It's got to be really confusing for everybody.
It was like, nobody believed me. They said like, oh, just go get some rest, because, I looked pretty fit. And there's no way that, if you stood me up next to anybody else, you would never be able to tell that I was going through all those symptoms, like those palpitations, that anxiety, and those headaches, and the 20 other symptoms I was experiencing. They would never know, because even all the times I ended up in the hospital, like, they couldn't find a solid answer for anything. They were just like, yeah, you need some electrolytes, or just go get some rest. That's what they told me.
I think that leads into this feeling or this perception sometimes of people that we're either exaggerating things or we're faking it. I still don't get. I know that there is a very small fraction of people in the world that do fake illness, but they are such a massive minority. For the average person, there is no motivation to fake being unwell. But I just think it's just too hard for people to wrap their brain around. And I think it's scary because for you, someone who's so fit and, so active, if this could happen to you, it could happen to them. So I think it's easier just to think, it's probably nothing really wrong.
And the other side of it too is like, nobody really believes you. So you start to not even believe yourself. Then you start asking yourself, am I actually going crazy? Like, because they're right. If I was them looking at me, I would think that I'm perfectly normal. Like, there's nothing from all the tests, everything comes out fairly normal. There's some things almost out of range, but I thought I was going crazy. I thought I was going insane, literally.
And what was happening through this process of this slow decline? Were you seeing doctors, and what were they saying? What were your thoughts about, aside from feeling like you were losing your mind?
A typical 3 to 5 month cycle within those 4 years. I would start working again, start picking up more clients, personal training. Then I just took on a little too many clients and I started feeling more symptoms and I try to push through it. And then I'd get to the point where like 4 or 5 months later, I end up like in the hospital calling the ambulance or whatever because I'm having trouble breathing. Like I really can't breathe. The migraines are horrible. I'm seeing like flashes everywhere. I literally felt like I was dying. So then I'd have to drop all my clients, literally be in bed for maybe 2 weeks, and then be in my house for like a month, and then slowly start building my activities. But I saw so many doctors. I think in those 4 years, I saw probably 15 doctors, like doctors, specialists, like neurologists, hematologists, all that, even naturopaths. And they couldn't give me a solid answer. No one could give me a solid answer and tell me like, this is exactly what's happening to you until I saw like the last doctor I've worked with. He pretty much broke it down to a science, which was amazing for me. That helped me really recover.
Okay. And I'm really excited to get into that. Before we move on to your recovery journey, I'm wondering if you could take us to when things got to their worst for you. What was your average day or week like? What were you thinking? How were your family reacting and friends?
So the worst I got was when I was bedridden for that 8-month period. And this was actually just 3.5 years ago. I was in bed for about 6 months at this point, and it got to the point where like I could not even move. And I think what happened was, when you're in bed for so long, your body almost gets stuck in that cycle of feeling all of the chronic pain, and it's almost like this pattern that's ingrained into your body. So I'd wake up, feel like absolute crap. I couldn't even go to the washroom by myself. I would have to hold on to my 72-year-old grandma, and she would help me go to the washroom. And I was living with my grandparents, so they were feeding me every day. Like every night they would pray over me. And my grandpa, the only time I would leave the house was to get IV appointments, which was like every 2 weeks. And he would put me in a wheelchair, roll me to the clinic, bring me back home, actually push me up the stairs. But what happened was, while he was taking care of me, he actually had a stroke. To see someone who literally helps you shower and like feed you and take care of you and push you upstairs, to see him like pass away like right in front of you, it was crazy. And so the stress just went through the roof, and I literally was like paralyzed. I felt like my whole body was being electrocuted at that stage, and that went on for like a week. Like my dad literally had to blend food, and I would have to drink it because even chewing would send shocks throughout all my body. And so I was in this insane state of stress. And eventually, they call the ambulance, and this time they actually let me stay at the hospital. Because all the times in the past, there were about 5 or 6 times where, they could put me in a wheelchair, I could sit up and they could wheel me home. But this time I couldn't even lift my head off the bed. And I was in ICU for about 3.5 weeks. And that was really tough because, every day I would wake up sitting in my bed or lying in my bed with 3 other people in the room. And these are people being told that, they have 4 months to live. They're just getting out of surgery. And then at that stage, I just thought to myself, like, how did I get in this situation? Like, I feel like I'm so deep in quicksand that I am never going to be able to get out. Like, how the heck did I end up here? Not being able to move in ICU. But they pretty much ran every test on me they could possibly run, and organs came out fine. And I was on several medications every day, like multiple Tylenols. They were actually injecting me with blood thinners because I couldn't move. Like, I couldn't even roll over a lot of times. So after about 3.5 weeks, they told me, they're like, look, there's nothing physically wrong with your body. Like, clearly there's something wrong, but it's not in your body. So 2 options. You can either go home now, and then you can come back and forth to see our psychiatrist here who might be able to help you. Or like, if you want, you can volunteer to stay in some extra beds we have. And it was actually in the psych ward. So I was like, initially, I'm like, no, I'm not staying in a psych ward. I don't want to do that. But at the same time, I didn't really have a choice. Like, I couldn't go back and forth to the hospital. So they're like, look, just try it out. If you don't want to do it after a day, then you can just go home. But there's extra beds. You'd be able to work with a psychiatrist who specializes in this type of illness every single day. and I think it'll be good for you. So at that stage, I was like, yeah, honestly, I'm willing to do literally whatever it takes. So let's do it. Roll me over to the psych ward. So I ended up staying there for 3 weeks. And honestly, that was the biggest shift in my recovery, because I was in a totally new environment. And I actually loved every minute of it, because, I went from not being able to lift my head off the bed and being super sick, feeling pain every day, to being able to at least roll around in a wheelchair and work with a doctor one-on-one. But the biggest thing was a change of environment. I was interacting with all the other people there. And even though like some of them, like they're not all there, just being able to talk to somebody and feel like a human again, was almost like a new hope for me. And that kind of lit the spark that made me be like, okay, if I can go from not being able to lift my head off the bed to being able to wheel myself to the washroom, and I have this doctor who specializes in this there as my like safety net, then there is hope for a better future.
I'm so grateful to you sharing this story. I don't know what people watching feel, but I find it so hard to hear. I'm so grateful, but it's so difficult to listen to, because it's such an intense level of suffering that it just is heartbreaking that any person should have to go through that. I can't even imagine how difficult and how scary that must have been for you.
Yeah, I can't even put into words. Like what I just said, that like I could honestly write a whole book on that experience. But I'm writing a book, so people can get like the more detailed version. But yeah, it can be like, man, I can't even describe what it's like. I mean, for people who are watching this and they're bedridden and maybe they're dealing with some things that are not even physical. There's like the mental aspect too. It's like you become this blank slate. It's like, okay, I was a personal trainer, and before I got really, really sick, I was the top trainer in the gym. I had just won the company-wide competition to go to Las Vegas, because I outsold like 300 trainers. So I actually achieved my goals. And at the time, I had my dream girlfriend, dream car. I was making the most money I've ever made. I was the best trainer in the gym, one of the top in the company. And, all that stuff got taken away so fast. So I went from, within 3 months, I went from having all of that to not being able to even stand up. And the only person I had by my side was like very close family and my girlfriend. And I just felt like everything was just stripped from me. So it's like, okay, if I'm not this person, then who am I? Like, who am I on the deepest level without everything else? That was probably even more difficult than the physical symptoms. It was losing your identity. That was huge.
Yeah, I suspect that's something that most people who have gone through something like this can relate to. It's amazing. I don't think we even appreciate how much of our identity is tied to our activities, and what it feels like to lose all of that. I always say it felt like I was kidnapped from my life. I just didn't know what was left. It was terrifying. Okay, so I am ridiculously curious and excited to hear about how this started to turn around for you. So what did that look like?
Yeah, so I mean, my doctor did a very good job breaking it down to science. So essentially he told me, he's like, look, everybody is telling you that you're crazy. I'm telling you that you're not. I'm telling you that what you're going through is real. And, there's a way to turn this around. So me personally, recently, I've had this sort of like the epiphany that looking back, knowing what I know now, recovery from what I went through, some like chronic fatigue, can be broken down into like a very simple timeline. So there's like dozens of treatments out there, dozens of things people can do. Some work, some don't, but no matter what kind of treatment people go with, this is what I know to be true. And there's 3 different stages to a full recovery, because if you don't have these things down, no treatment can really give you like a full lasting recovery. And so I think the first one is going to be a mindset shift. Second one is like dealing with symptoms. Third one is building thresholds. So for mindset, like you really need a mindset shift. And if you don't have a mindset shift, then you'll always end up back where you're at. So even if you do get better using treatments, your habits and your thinking patterns will eventually lead you down the same path. So my mindset was not sustainable. Like no matter what I did or what I tried, I would always go into things with the same mindset. So it actually required me looking back into my past to know what led me down this path. So I had to reverse engineer the events in my life and narrow them down to like these defining moments that made me do all this crazy stuff that made me like disregard my health. So, I remember it goes back to me sitting in that manager's office, getting hired to be the personal trainer. I felt ecstatic for this new chapter in my life. I had imagined that moment for years and I was thrilled. So to a regular person, it was just a regular job. But to me, it was something that I was willing to do whatever it takes, like literally anything. And so that was one of those moments where I was like, okay, we definitely shouldn't have any more of those moments. That in addition to other things in my life. Let's not go all in on certain things. So that was a mindset shift. I was like, I understood that, okay, you can't just go all in on something. You need to have some balance in your life. So I think the mind shift is huge. And once you shift your mindset, then I think the next step is just deciding that you no longer want to be in the cycle and you're willing to break free from the old thinking patterns. And it's just dealing with symptoms. So with dealing with symptoms, it means every time you feel symptoms, you have to challenge those feelings and those sensations with something else, something more positive or something different. And for me, the biggest thing was seeing every episode of chronic pain, because for me, the pain was actually almost just as bad, if not worse, than the fatigue. But I had to see every episode of chronic pain as an opportunity to rewire the brain. So when I got out of the hospital, I would spend a lot of time just sitting outside. I was sitting on a bench overlooking the water, I remember. And I was feeling some symptoms from just walking about 100 meters from the apartment after I got out of the hospital. And I thought to myself, okay, I'm feeling symptoms, I'm feeling headaches, feeling heart rate go up, but this is just another opportunity to rewire my brain. So I no longer felt anger or fear or frustration towards those symptoms. In fact, it was like the exact opposite, because I actually welcomed those symptoms and actually sought them out, knowing that the only way to make them go away for good was to practice redirecting my brain away from going down that kind of automatic pathway. So, that's what really worked for me, and a lot of people who ask me for help, it's really been helping them. It's like that micro decision to be like, okay, my brain wants to go into panic and fear mode when I feel this stuff come up. No, I'm going to go a different route. So that's the mindset, dealing with symptoms aspect of it. But the third thing, I think the biggest thing is building threshold. And this is where people are able to actually go out into the real world. They're still refining and fine tuning the way their body responds to things, but people tend to feel less and less symptoms in the stage because they're much better. Like they're not homebound or they're not stuck in a bed all day. And this is where the good habits come into play, and it plays a massive role. So, we're trying to build that threshold for stress for the body so that it'll be able to handle more and more things. And eventually people will be able to do everything else they used to do, but, maybe even more. So that stage is it's like the longer stage. But that's where, you don't really have a finish line. You're never going to be like, I'm done recovering, because you're always going to be getting better, and you'll realize that like this now becomes a lifestyle of just being aware of how your body is doing and not brushing that health aside.
Did most of this insight and this learning come from your experience in the hospital?
Yeah, definitely. My doctor actually, for 3 weeks, I sat in a room with him for at least an hour, and like almost every day, and he would draw these diagrams up on the board and make these analogies and teach me about how the brain works and the difference between like acute pain and chronic pain, and how chronic pain can be retrained, how anxiety is like a magnifying glass. So like one of the great analogies he told me, it's like, so think of a spider. If there's a tiny spider, it's not much danger. Like it's not that scary for people who are afraid of spiders. But if you take a magnifying glass and put it over the spider, that spider's going to look so much bigger. And it's almost like an illusion. So that magnifying glass is like anxiety. The bigger the magnifying glass, like the more anxiety you have. So I totally resonated with that, because, when I was hyper focused on my symptoms and thinking about them, I would feel them more and more and more, which makes sense. So there were so many golden nuggets that he taught me that I was able to create frameworks around it and kind of put it all together to have this like formula for recovery.
So the bulk of your recovery process or journey, was it 100% brain retraining techniques, or were there other aspects to it?
No, there were other aspects. Actually, I did get on some medication as well. And that was what he said, it was to dampen the nervous system, because I was in such a bad hole. Like, I think it was to the point where they said I couldn't get better without medication, because I couldn't even lift my head off the hospital bed. And this was like for more than 3 weeks. And, I couldn't even stand up to go to the washroom. I couldn't even feed myself most of the time. So they were like, yeah, you were at the point where if it was just brain retraining, you probably wouldn't be able to get out of it. Someone this bad, you definitely need medication. And I've always been against, big pharma and all these things. I went to a naturopath and I did over 100 IVs for 2 years, still got worse. But they had me on an antidepressant, which was the whole scientific, reason behind it was like dampening my nervous system. It was just kind of calming it down so it wasn't as responsive. Because I literally felt like there was electricity running through my body and I was getting zapped like all day. So this toned that down, as well as an anti-anxiety just for the first couple months. But those really helped. I think as soon as I got on the anti-anxiety, for the first month it was first 2 weeks it was Ativan, just one a night. And it was the first time in a long time that I was able to actually sleep. But it's weird because some doctor gave me Ativan before and an anti-anxiety, and it made me so much worse before. But I think I was just at that perfect stage for them to give me that stuff. And it also helped that the doctor knew exactly what stage I was in and how I was doing and what needed to be done to kind of pull me out of that hole.
It's good to know. And I think a lot of us have given up on any medications at this point helping us at all. So it's good to know that they can play a role for some people. It might not be the whole picture, but it can definitely help you out of that. I always wonder, for the people who are severe and very severe with these illnesses, I have people contact me, just asking for suggestions. I never, of course, tell people what to do. I don't know what they should do, but it's such a hard thing, because when you can't even lift your head up, when you can't even sit up, like, where do you start? Like, where does one even start? All the things I did, like healing my gut and building a movement program, like, they're just not feasible. So it's really helpful and insightful to hear what this journey can look like when you're coming from that place.
Absolutely. And I think it's exactly like being in quicksand. Like, you feel like you're so deep in it, you're about to be suffocated in this quicksand, but it's like invisible quicksand. The more you try to move, you actually just get worse and worse, and you sink deeper into that pit. So, a lot of people ask me, they're like, oh, what medication should I go on? Should I get on that one you got on? And then right off the bat, I know that it's not going to fix them. Because if you're relying on that one thing to pull you out of that hole and do the work for you, then it's not going to work. The medication was just a small part in the beginning of my recovery. But my doctor made it very clear, and I even noticed it, like, if you do not do the brain retraining, or you do not start building your stress threshold and introduce good habits, mainly the biggest thing is if you don't shift your mindset, you're going to end up back at that same place, 100%. Because, let's just say people take a medication or take something and they feel a lot better, they're going to go back to whatever they were doing. It's almost like they didn't learn the lesson, right? So when I was doing IVs for more than 2 years, I did over 100 IVs paying out of my pocket. And every time I would get it, I would feel pretty good. And then so I relied on that. So I continued doing whatever I was doing. I continued working like crazy, not sleeping as much, being super stressed out. And I would just keep upping and upping and upping the IVs to the point where I was doing like 2 a week at one point, and I was still getting worse. So at that point, it's almost like, I like to call like a synthetic recovery. It's not real. Like, your body's relying on something externally, but you take that thing away, you're going to be so much worse than before you took it. So for people who always ask me like supplements and medication, I make it very clear, like, okay, this is probably 10% of the puzzle. Yeah.
Right. I'm glad you clarified that as well, because I'm not an expert and this is all anecdotal, but from the people that I've talked to, it seems like waiting for a medication to get you out of this, you're going to be waiting a long time. Perhaps one day there will be something, but I've yet to hear of anyone who just started taking some kind of pill and they were better. With the IVs that you're referencing, I'm curious, was it always the same thing, or was it, can you tell us a bit more about what those IVs were?
So the IVs, they were Myers cocktails. So they're a bunch of B vitamins, and we actually treated, the whole time we were treating my illness as adrenal fatigue. Even though my adrenals were within normal range, on the very low spectrum, but they were within normal. But we were treating it as adrenal fatigue. So I was taking adaptogens. There was like adrenal extract from animals in that IV. And, it gave me a boost for probably about a year. But, I'd sit there, sit down for about 45 minutes. They'd stick a needle in my arm. I'd watch a YouTube video or something, and then the whole bag would drip into my arm. I'd feel re-energized for about a week or two. And it did help a lot with the symptoms and the energy, but eventually it would wear off. So it's like I would get a boost, pretty much a health boost, and then I'd keep doing what I was doing. So then I'd get a little bit worse and worse and worse. So I got another boost like that, got worse and worse, got another boost until I was just like, digging myself into a deeper and deeper hole.
So when you were recovering, doing everything in the program that you learned at the hospital, what did that journey look like? How long did it take?
I actually saw results very quickly, in the beginning especially. I had to count my steps when I got out of the hospital, make sure I didn't pass like 200 steps a day or 300. And I was still feeling a lot of symptoms. It's not like I got out of the hospital and they were like, okay, you can go live your life now. No, there were a lot of times where I would still be kind of just hanging out on the bed, but now it was more optional. Like I could go outside, I could do stuff. I just felt a lot of symptoms. I still felt that some of the headaches, not as bad though. Still felt the kind of burning sensation all over my body, but the brain retraining was so essential, especially in those beginning stages, to rewire my brain to stop feeling this chronic pain 24/7. So whenever I would feel pain, I just literally closed my eyes. It doesn't matter where I was, if I was in the car or waiting for my girlfriend at the mall, anywhere, close my eyes, and I would imagine those pain centers in my brain lighting up and expanding, because our brain actually has like 16 pain centers. What happens is, so just to give people context, there's 16 pain centers in the brain. Those centers, they're meant for processing both pain and sensation. So like smell, taste, touch, sound, things like that. But when you're in pain for such a long time, normally those pain centers, it's supposed to be like 90% senses, 10% pain. If you're in a prolonged state of pain, then it goes to like 50% senses, 50% pain. So that's why like you could hear a sound or see a bright light and it could trigger pain. And that's why I had to wear a blindfold and earplugs for literally 8 months. Like my grandma had to be careful when she closed doors in the house, or else it would trigger a migraine right away. And that's because it's stimulating that area in my brain that's meant for processing sound or sight. But at the same time, it also triggered the pain. So the brain retraining, it helps those pain centers get back to their regular levels, back to about a 90% sense and 10% pain, signal. So yeah, every time I would feel symptoms, I close my eyes, imagine the pain centers increasing and expanding and glowing. And then I would imagine them, slowly fading away and losing their color and losing their size and just shrinking. And I just expand them and shrink them. And it kind of teaches your brain, it makes that connection between your brain and your body, what's happening. I think when he told me that chronic pain happens in your brain, it's actually not happening in your body. Acute pain happens in your body. So let's say you stub your toe once on a corner. That's acute pain. That's your leg saying, your foot saying, okay, definitely don't do that again. That hurts. That's causing harm to the body. But let's say you stub it 20 times in a day. Now you're going to start anticipating that pain, and you're going to feel pain even just walking by that corner. And so the pain is actually happening in your brain as like a defense mechanism to try to protect you. So when you do so much activity and you're pushing your body to its limits, your body puts this limiter on itself so that you don't do all that stuff. And the only way to do that is to like put yourself in a state of pain. So I learned that it wasn't my body punishing me. It was just trying to protect me, and that there was nothing really wrong with the hardware. If you think about the body like a computer, there's nothing wrong with the hardware. It was the software that was the problem. There was a glitch. It's almost like a virus in a computer. If you get rid of the virus, everything works perfectly normal. So that was my brain. It was just retraining it to, instead of going down this path of chronic pain and worry and fear and anxiety, all that stuff, then I would have to redirect those thoughts instantly as soon as I felt it, felt those things come up. So the trick is I had to do it very quickly. Like as soon as I felt those come up, you can't even give it time to develop and grow into this monster in your brain, in your head, and in your thoughts. You have to immediately go to something else. And in the beginning, it's very hard. It's like turning an Air Force carrier ship around. It's very slow. But once you get that momentum, then your brain starts going down that path easier and easier. There's this one instance I remember. This was almost a turning point for me to know that I'm actually able to go out into the real world, like recovery is possible. 3 months after I got out of the hospital, a friend messages me. He's like, "Hey, there's a convention in San Jose. Do you want to come with us and record the whole trip and vlog it?" I was like, well, there's no way I can do that because I could barely walk around the mall. How am I going to go to San Jose? And he was like, "Come on, just try it, man. It's going to be sunny. There's palm trees. You're going to be with some positive people." And, something inside me said, you should do this. You're ready for this. And I asked my doctor. He was like, "Honestly, I think you should go. Like, now that you're on this medication, you're doing all the right things. You shouldn't go backward. I mean, you shouldn't crash. You're not going to go back to ground zero where you started." So I was so nervous. I almost canceled the night before. I called him. I was like, "Dude, I don't think I can do it. Like, my heart's skipping beats. I'm stressed out. I don't think I can even walk to the airport gate." And he was like, "All right, man, well, I'll still show up there in the morning and you can have some time to think about it. You can hop in the car or not." So he shows up. I'm like, let's do it. Let's do it. And then, so I went on that trip, and when I was in San Jose, I remember I would wake up in the morning, go around on those Lime scooters and, eat some good breakfast. And I was sitting there like, holy cow, 3 months ago, I was in a hospital bed thinking that I wasn't going to live, that I wasn't going to survive. But here I am in another country in the nice sunshine. I didn't think any of this was possible. And I'm like, well, if I can do this, then man, I might actually have a life ahead of me. Like it really is possible. And so that was huge. That was a huge milestone. And I think what really, really turned the tide for me in the right direction was the following January. So I got out of the hospital first, a day after my birthday, actually, March 29th, 2018. In 2019, in January, I went to Hawaii with my mom and brother. And we spent 8 days in Oahu. They had all these hikes planned, and I went into it being like, okay, well, I'm just going to hang out at the hotel. I'm not going on these hikes up mountains with you guys. But they were like, okay, just hop in the car. They bring me in the car at 5 a.m. They're like, just come see the mountain. So I go there, see the mountain, and then I ended up actually doing all the hikes with them and keeping up. And when I was on top of that mountain in Hawaii, and I was watching the sunrise at like 7 a.m., feeling the wind on my face, I just thought to myself, man, like less than a year ago, I literally thought I was on the last chapter of my life. But here I am in Hawaii now, like a whole different person. And this is stuff I dreamed about, and I wrote letters to myself, and I thought about every single day when I was sick. When I couldn't move in bed, that's where my mind was. I was focused on standing on top of a mountain or going on a hike. But to me, it was a long shot. There was like a 0.01% chance. But there was that part of me that thought it would be really cool to do that one day. And to actually do it, I can't even put into words what that feeling of accomplishment meant like. And I think the biggest thing that, the biggest mind shift then was, wow, all the suffering that I went through, all the pain, all the tears I cried, all the letters I wrote to myself, all the nights where I thought it was like my last breath, to be on top of that mountain and watch the sunrise. It honestly made the whole journey worth it to feel that. And it just made me so much more grateful for everything. And the lessons that I learned when I was sick, I was able to take with me everywhere else in life. Like even now when I run my video production business, I mean, it's not easy. There's a lot of clients I'm dealing with, a lot of projects can be very stressful. But at the end of the day, when it gets to the point where I'm like very overwhelmed, I just sit back and think like, this is all icing on the cake. Like I was able to survive without a job, without any nice things, just people and family around. So everything right now, I could walk away from all of this and still be happy that I'm alive, that I can get out of bed and walk. So it definitely shifted my perspective for the better. And I think, honestly, it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me, as hard as it is to believe that.
What an incredible story. I love this so much. I keep thinking while you're talking, because it's so heartbreaking to see so many people out there that are still facing this. And it's just such a hell. It can be such a nightmare to go through. And I just keep thinking, oh, if there's hope for you, I feel like there is hope for everybody, which is just incredible. Oh, it's such a moving story. Thank you for sharing all of that.
Absolutely. I love sharing it and inspiring people. Like when I was sick, I always told myself, if I ever, by some miracle, I do get better, then I definitely want to share this with people because, I know how hard it can be. And it is literally like you're living a nightmare, but you just never wake up from it.
Yeah, it was something similar for me as well. I made this desperate plea to the universe when I was at my worst. And I like, you don't have to fix me. Just get me on the right path. Like, help me figure this out. And I promise I will do everything I can to just reach out to other people and share my story. And, I understand now that, what helped me isn't going to help everybody, but it's just, yeah, it's so many of us come back after, I think, because we know what that hell feels like. So it's like, you just want people to know that there's hope and there are options.
And I feel like now with the online space, there's more and more of these stories coming out. Like when I was going through it, I found like one Facebook community that talked about this kind of stuff, and there are people experiencing it, but I had no idea that there were this many people experiencing this stuff. And I think it has to do with the technology and all that stuff and the stimulation that we're experiencing. But I feel like it's probably something we're going to see more and more of. I talk about it in one of my videos, the science behind my recovery, but the way the brain's wired, we're just not used to having this much stimulus. Like for millions of years, we were just hunter-gatherers. We slept at night, woke up with the sunrise. But now there's like synthetic light. There's the circadian rhythm is totally off. Food is different. And just, having like our phones, notifications, just being alert all the time, our bodies are just not wired for that. It hasn't had the time to adapt with all these changes. And I think, some people don't get affected by this stuff, but a lot of people do. And so I think it's up to people like us to really be that beacon of light for people, to show them that it's possible and kind of guide them through it.
I'm wondering, I imagine you've noticed something similar, but at least with some people in the MECFS community, there is a bit of pushback or a bit of resistance at the idea that things like brain retraining and focusing on the mind can be a part or the whole solution to this illness. So what do you think? Where do you think that resistance comes from?
I think it comes from, like, in today's world, there's a solution to almost everything. And people are used to being able to buy a solution or get a solution from outside, from outside themselves. And they look externally for that solution. Like so many things, if you have a problem in life, then you either buy something to fix it or hire someone to fix it. But very few times do we actually look within for a solution. I think now it's like people are always looking for the next best treatment, next best medication, next best diet, next best routine. They want that one magic thing that's going to help them get out of the hole, but they forget to look within. And really the answer is within. Like, I'm not sure for you, but I think for me, it was the mind shift. That was everything. And for people who are messaging me on Instagram and the few people I work with, their biggest thing was that mind shift and just seeing things a different way. Like when you have that mind shift, it's almost like the weight comes off and it's like you feel a huge weight has been lifted off your shoulder. I compare it to, in my videos, I compare it to trying to swim and catch your breath, but you're being pulled down by, all this baggage in life, and all the pressures, and, people are just afraid to let go. And bottom line is they're looking outside themselves for the solution. And they don't, I think they've probably tried some form of meditation or brain retraining or whatever, and it didn't really work. But the thing is, with brain retraining, it's been shown that it takes minimum 4 to 6 weeks for you to actually see major results. But most people, they'll try it for a few days or a week, and it won't work. And they'll be like, okay, well, I was expecting better results, so this doesn't work. That's why with everybody, when they ask about brain retraining, I tell them, I'm like, okay, don't expect this to be a miracle. In the long run, it will be a miracle, but it's not going to change things overnight. It's going to take a lot of effort on your part. So if you are ready to put the work in, then it will work for you. But there is a lot of work that needs to be done. That's why I think it was so important that my doctor broke it down to a science. And he was like, this isn't this isn't just some theory I'm making up. This is data I've pulled from helping literally thousands of people with this. Like, he's from India, and he was saying in India, there's so many people with somatic disorder. And any kind of culture where there's lots of pressure and, even some poverty, like places with poverty, this thing happens a lot. More than we realize. And he's seen people get better from it using the same principles. And he was like, look, this is how your brain works. This is how your nervous system works. These are the steps you need to take to retrain it. And it all comes down to like neuroplasticity. And that was huge for me. So I always recommend people to go listen to that book, The Brain's Way of Healing, because it talks about people who had chronic pain for years. Like, they had broken knees and hips and shoulders, and people with fibromyalgia actually cure themselves. Obviously not overnight, but with brain retraining exercises. And I like it because it's so simple, and it doesn't take that long to do. For me, the brain retraining was like, I don't know, every day when I got out of the hospital, I did it for like 20 minutes, and then did it throughout the day. So like 2 minutes here, 3 minutes there, 4 minutes there. But yeah, once people understand it, I think they can accept the solution a lot easier, that they need to do a lot of brain retraining and have a mind shift.
Well, as we kind of wrap up here, I could sit here and pick your brain all day, and I'm really hoping that maybe you'll come back on the channel one day. I'd love to talk more about this. You're a wealth of information on this and just really inspiring. But, I always like to kind of finish off with people sharing, what would you tell yourself if you could go back in time? Or what message might you have for people watching who are still in this?
What I would tell myself that I had it in myself the whole time, and that it didn't need to get as bad as it did. Although, I don't have any regrets for what happened, but I think the answer was within the whole time. But because I was so focused on finding the solution somewhere else, then, that led me to getting worse and worse and worse, until I had no choice but to look within and change what was inside and what was up here to get better. So that's what I would tell myself, is that you actually have this within you. And so for people out there who are trying to get better, I think in all of our lives, there are times when we can do things on our own, and there are times when we're better off either, getting help from other people like you or me, or people in this community to guide them and help them. But, when we give you all this advice, actually try to take it to heart, and don't try to learn everything you know about it. Don't try to watch every single video. Actually focus on something and really take it to heart. And do it, and practice the brain retraining. And, just don't try to do it by yourself. There's lots of really great people out there. When you do make the decision to try to get help or work with people, just make sure, they resonate with your story. Number one. Number two, make sure that you're actually ready for change. Because for me, looking back now, I thought I was ready for change, but I really wasn't. Make sure you're ready for change, number two. And number three is, make sure you're willing to commit to something if you try to get help, and make sure you go in it with your full heart and you're ready to make that change. So, I know where you are right now, and I know this whole journey, when you come out at the end of it, it's hard to believe it now, but it's probably going to be the best thing that ever happened to you. So the next 6 months, next 12 months, you can't leave it up to chance. You can't leave it up to nature or getting lucky. You need to determine your future, and it's really up to you at the end of the day, and you need to make that decision like, I'm ready for change and I'm willing to do whatever it takes, even if I have to let go of who I am now for who I will become in the future. And I think that's the biggest thing.
It's such a powerful message, and it's so empowering. I think so many of us feel so scared and so lost and so powerless when this happens. And, my experience was sitting in doctor's offices, and I had so much riding on those appointments because I felt like they were going to fix me. So to know that we have some control in all of this is a really incredible thing. Of course, we have to learn things and skills and tools. We still need to connect and learn with other people, but yeah, it's a really, really important message. So can you tell us a bit where, if people want to learn more, if they want to find you, you talked about your channel, tell us a bit about that.
So if you want to, visit my channel, I talk about this stuff. I release 3 long videos a week to try to give as much information as possible, but it's CFS Recovery on YouTube. And we also created this Facebook community. It's called a community of thrivers. So I've given the name for this kind of tribe. It's thrivers because, a survivor is someone who just gets through something, but a thriver is someone who becomes better, makes leaps and bounds because of something that happened in their life. And with something like this, I think everybody can be a thriver. And I think the goal shouldn't just be to get through this, but to become better because of it. And I think we all have that within us. So, but the main place you guys can find me is at CFS Recovery on YouTube. And from there, then I have links in the descriptions and all of that for people to go elsewhere.
Wonderful. And as always, of course, this will all be in the video description. So people watching, I highly encourage you. His channel is amazing, to just take a quick look, give it a click, and subscribe, because it is full of really great stuff. And you're just such a wonderful person, Miguel. And I just really enjoy talking to you. I really appreciate all that you've shared today. Well, I guess that's it for today. Thank you, everyone who's watching. As always, looking forward to your comments and questions. And if you're looking for more videos like this, I have lots on my channel, dozens now. I'll link some up on the screen at the end of the video, and you can check them out. So many inspiring recovery stories. There is hope for everyone out there who is struggling, everyone feels like things are never going to get better. So many of us have been there, and things can get better, and they do. So keep at it. Sending love and support to all of you. So thanks again, Miguel. Thank you to everyone watching, and I'll see you in the next video.